Good afternoon and welcome to the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. It is Friday, the 6th of February, 2025. And of course, we're on 101.1 FM radio. We're also on our Facebook page. You just have to search for the official page of Radio Caribbean International. Also on YouTube, as well as our website, rcistlucia.com. Now, of course, a little bit of history for today, and we go back in time to the year 1840. The Treaty of Waitangi was signed between 40 Maori chiefs, eventually it is signed by 500 of those chiefs and representatives of the British Crown in Waitangi in New Zealand, and shared sovereignty between the two groups. Excuse me. As well, in the year 1865, on this day, General Robert E. Lee was appointed General-in-Chief of the Confederate Armies. 1952, on this day, February the 6th, Queen Elizabeth II succeeded King George VI to the British throne and was proclaimed Queen of the United Kingdom and other Commonwealth realms. 1989, on this day, Poland's communist government began roundtable talks with the Solidarity Trade Union and its leader, Lech Walesa, in an attempt to ease growing social unrest. And in the year 2023, on this day, a powerful earthquake struck Turkey and Syria, first with a magnitude 7.8 and at about 23 kilometers east of Nurdagi, and then a second earthquake of magnitude 7.5 with many strong aftershocks causing buildings to collapse. The death toll was placed at 53,537 in Turkey and over 8,000 in Syria. We now head across to our dish of the day. Welcome back to the lunchroom here at Radio Caribbean International. Now, of course, there's been quite a lot happening in this region, right here in the Caribbean of late, as we have seen rising tensions and the role of the United States growing, particularly militarily, in respect of the situation over in Venezuela. What we saw not too long ago, the taking away of Mr. Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, who is now in a New York prison, facing charges in a U.S. court on the allegations of narco trafficking. Of course, it harkened back to the end of the 1980s, that era, towards the end, with dealing with the end of the Cold War, and Manuel Noriega, of the president of Panama, being taken away in a very similar way. This time, however, it's a lot more of moving the pieces on a chessboard and how things are interconnected. Yes, Panama, very, very important for trade, no doubt about it, but the U.S., in fact, already had control of the Panama Canal at that time. But the actions in Venezuela of late have certainly had ripple effects in terms of the state of play across the world, really. And lots of pressure now being placed on Cuba in this context, and we were speaking about that just yesterday. Now, even as that is happening, the U.S. At the same time placing its concerns and making its concerns known about the Cuban medical missions that have been so critical to the health sectors of various countries. And quite recently, in fact, I think just today, another statement coming out of the U.S. officials out of the Bahamas, where that country, over in its capital, Nassau, looking to construct another hospital for its people, and doing so through the efforts of a Chinese company, and the United States suggesting that the Bahamian government should go a different way, and should not be dealing with that particular Chinese company, one of the Chinese state company, China, I think, Railway Corporation. Many of these Chinese companies involved in construction projects all over the world, and certainly in the Caribbean as well. One of the largest projects in the Caribbean ever undertaken, Bahamar, was by a Chinese developer and firm. And of course, many significant investments in infrastructure have been through the support of the Chinese government and Chinese companies in the region. Of course, they are very much front and center in a lot of the infrastructure development happening right now in Guyana. They've done quite a bit over in Jamaica as well, with, major highways, certainly changing the means of and speed of travel across Jamaica, and investments all around the world, really. And of course, China has been that rising power in respect of um, its economy, and has, based on GDP, on a purchasing power parity, which is one method of looking at the GDP. China has already somewhat surpassed the United States in that sense. There's a very interesting graphic, which obviously you can't see, but which it gave a breakdown, an infographic giving a breakdown of the $1 trillion club. And of course, it effectively looks at when these countries around the world had a GDP, were able to achieve a GDP of $1 trillion, right? So we're talking about $1,000 billion, and that the first country to have actually been able to achieve that was back in 1969. 1969, and of course, that was the United States of America. Then followed by that of Japan. 10 years later, actually, Japan was already crossing that $1 trillion mark, and really goes to show how significant the Japanese rise was in that post World War II era, and how how tremendous they were able to grow through the rise of industry and manufacturing. And of late, of course, the Japanese economy has gone into a bit of stagnation. It has been facing challenges of population growth, very, very low population growth, population effectively stagnant. Japan, I think, is the one place in the world where you've got over 100,000 people, I think, is it, over the age of 100 in Japan. So aging population there, low birth rates, and they certainly have not been able to grow so significantly over the past couple of decades. France was able to hit the $1 trillion economy mark back in 1988. But interesting enough, the country that was able to do so just before it was West Germany in 1987, and then Britain in 1989, and then Italy in 1919. But of course, so those countries were doing so almost a good 2 decades or 20 years after the United States was already had made that mark, and then of course had continued to grow tremendously. And China was able to do so in 1998. So you're really talking about nearly 3 decades later in the case of China. The latest entry actually is that of Turkey. About, I think, 21 countries that are actually in that $1 trillion club today. So, whereas before the major players were the United States of America and then Europe, these European countries all grouped together, uh, the EU, and as well now, of course, China, the state of play has certainly changed in terms of the size and scale of economies around the world. And what you now, of course, have found is that there are a lot of countries in the middle now. They're not superpowers. And the United States right now, based on nominal GDP, is somewhere about over $30 trillion. That's the size of the US economy. And in terms of nominal GDP, again, the Chinese economy is about trillion dollars, my apologies. So roughly about two-thirds the size of the US economy. But remember, uh, China has somewhere in the region of almost 3 to 4 times the population of the United States of America. And so, of course, when you look at it on a per capita basis, it still has a big gap to go in terms of getting to that extent of wealth that exists in the United States. But then after China, it all tapers out very, very quickly. I mean, Germany, which is the third largest economy in the world, currently stands at about $5 trillion, followed by Japan and India, which are about $4 trillion each. And then you get into the European countries. And so you do have some other very interesting emerging powers. Certainly the likes of Brazil, the likes of Mexico, South Korea. You've got Turkey in the club now as well, as I mentioned. Indonesia as well, also in there as a major emerging power. And there's so many of them now that this is where this whole idea of the middle power comes in. And this is something that was spoken of by the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, at the World Economic Forum over in Switzerland in Davos just a couple of weeks ago. And of course, that speech that he gave signaled a lot of things in terms of the standing of Canada, but also effectively pointing out that the world now is at this point of no return, that things are certainly not the same anymore, thanks to the action, certainly, of the Trump administration in shifting the state of play and shifting alliances. And so, what are we witnessing currently? We're seeing a tremendous amount of militarization in Europe at the moment. European countries are scraping out the dollars and finding money and redirecting money into defense spending. And certainly the leader for that right now is Germany. They're the largest economy in Europe. They're in the center of Europe. They in on that general North European plain region where it places it in a very vulnerable position for potential attacks from the east and, of course, from a somewhat long-standing fear and foe of an attack from Russia. And of course, other players within that mix, Poland, which kind of finds itself right in between those two countries, very flat, very easy country to move troops across. And so it is certainly a period of tremendous militarization, which we have not seen for quite some time. being witnessed by Europe. Europe has, of course, been one of the players that has been trying to project an agenda of uh, changes on renewable energy, on climate change, trying to push on some development agendas as well. And what you're certainly going to see is that budget, that international development spending, is going to be drying up. And certainly, from what we've seen out of the United Kingdom, for example, that's the direction that they're going to, because they now have to be spending so much more in terms of defense. Some may argue that this was long in coming. Some were suggesting that Europe, of course, was really depending on the United States as this main player of, the police officer who would come and keep the peace. And effectively, the US is saying that, look, this is not going to be a free ride anymore in terms of your own security, that you've got to begin taking up that bill. And guess what? the greatest beneficiary, of course, of that effort is quite likely going to be U.S. Contractors, U.S. companies, U.S. defense companies, who would therefore be in the best position right now to be able to provide a lot of these the weaponry that Europe desires. There was an irony, I think, in the case of Denmark not too long ago, and people were arguing that Denmark wanted to improve on its defense efforts as well, of course, in the situation of Greenland. And who are they going to turn to for that defense, that equipment? And of course, it was the United States of America. So it's a very interesting situation still, because that dependency lies within the context of the US. But here you have Mr. Carney coming forward and saying that, look, we have to realize that this is a not more than a wake-up call. And many persons have, in fact, spoken about it and are looking at why this statement was so impactful. I think we have lined up, in fact, a not a statement, but a piece coming out of a Harvard professor, Welt. Let me just make sure that we can see that. Yes, and he is speaking on the matter of why that speech was so important and seemingly radical. So I think we should. Okay. We've got a bit of an issue right now in getting it, but we'll sort it out shortly. But the message, of course, that the world is it's not in a transition; it's a rupture situation at this point. The changes that have occurred over the past really just a year have been so astounding that it really places every part of the world in a very different situation, where the larger powers, the middle powers, the likes of Canada, these trillion-dollar economies, they can flex some muscle. But the big question is, what does that mean for countries that are just scraping $1 billion of GDP, like many of us in the Caribbean? What muscle is there to flex? So let's take a listen. I think it's is it available? Okay, so we're just about to get it going at this time.
A radical. So for him to say something, Carney is hardly a radical. So for him to say something essentially saying that the world of the past is past and we have to chart a different course in light of these new realities, I think was quite significant.
We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination.
I think it is actually quite a significant moment. It's clear that a lot of people in the room were thinking similar thoughts. And I think we're glad to have someone finally state them openly and as clearly as Carney did. It's also significant who said it. I mean, Canada used to be just about our best friend, certainly the best neighbor any country could possibly ask for. And Carney is hardly a radical. He's an absolute mainstream politician, real establishment person. So for him to say something essentially saying that the world of the past is past, it's not coming back, and we have to chart a different course in light of these new realities, I think was quite significant.
And our new approach rests on what Alexander Stubb, the president of Finland, has termed value-based realism. Or to put another way, we aim to be both principled and pragmatic. Principled in our commitment to fundamental values, sovereignty, territorial integrity, the prohibition of the use of force except when consistent with the UN Charter, and pragmatic in recognizing that progress is often incremental, that interests diverge, that not every partner will share all of our values.
I don't think Carney was talking sort of as realist as IR theory. He was mostly saying realism in the sense of no illusions. We have to look at the world as it really is, not how we might want it to be. He was suggesting a very realist idea, which is that states have to come together to balance against dangerous or erratic countries, and that states with similar values should join forces to protect those interests and also their values. I might add that, the idea that many people have that realists or realism is amoral or that doesn't have a moral position, I think is just wrong. The whole realist take is that it's a dangerous world. You want to be prudent. You want to value peace as much as possible. You don't want to fight stupid wars, etc. And in some respects, Carney was reflecting that we need to have, careful, sober judgment, not erratic policies, and use, prudent statecraft and cooperation with others to protect Canadian interests and the interests of other like-minded countries.
The multilateral institutions on which the middle powers have relied, the WTO, the UN, the COP, the very architecture of collective problem solving are under threat. And as a result, many countries are drawing the same conclusions, that they must develop greater strategic autonomy in energy, food, critical minerals, in finance and supply chains. And this impulse is understandable. A country that can't feed itself, fuel itself, or defend itself has few options.
To me, a Europe that was more capable of, say, protecting itself without enormous amounts of American help would be conducive to peace, I think. It might not be as desirable as a world in which the United States is playing a responsible, prudent, active, but restrained role. A world where the United States is either totally disengaged or behaving in an erratic or destructive fashion is obviously worse. I would like to see the United States as a constructive force, but if we're not playing that role, then I hope other countries with sort of more sensible outlooks take on a greater role.
Hegemons cannot continually monetize their relationships. Allies will diversify to hedge against uncertainty. They'll buy insurance, increase options in order to rebuild sovereignty. Sovereignty that was once grounded in rules, but will increasingly be anchored in the ability to withstand pressure.
There is clearly a collective action problem. Getting a lot of medium powers to coordinate their actions and continue that over time, sustain that over time, is obviously not going to be easy. Certainly what these countries can all do, and they're doing it already, is begin to hedge and diversify, beginning with economic ties. The European Union signing trade deals with Mercosur in Latin America, with India now as well. Canada has started to move in that direction as well. Carney made a trip to Beijing. And it's not clear that these countries have much choice in a world where the great powers are contending with each other, yes, but are also increasingly predatory towards smaller states and medium powers. And again, that was sort of Carney's point. You're either hosting the dinner or you're on the menu, and you don't want to be on the menu.
Right. Of course, as I said, that coming from a Harvard professor of international relations, Professor Thomas Welt. And the message coming from Carney, of course, the reality of the world right now, the hegemons are effectively trying to monetize every single relationship that they have. And so, of course, when you have a situation where the Ukraine, for example, has been fighting a war with Russia, special military operation, as Mr. Putin might want to call it, and the cavalry isn't going to come until you ensure that whatever wealth you have in your country is opened up for the arriving cavalry. And that is on one side of things, the challenge that many countries like Ukraine and Europe are facing right now. What's in it for me? Why should I come to save the day for you? And of course, there are other instances where we are seeing open aggression by the hegemons. In fact, targeting again mineral grabs and land grabs and desires to increase wealth effectively at the expense, of course, of many pawns that may be in the way. And so we're seeing a bit of that, quite a bit of that right now in the case of Latin America and the Caribbean, of course, very much centered on Venezuela, the world's largest reserves of oil and gas. And that is effectively being targeted and by the United States as an area of great interest. Never mind, of course, we're seeing the challenges being reported in terms of their own oil refineries to be able to keep up with what is going on there. But there is this desire to continue to expand that reach and to a rush as well to effectively change the status quo, which has existed in many countries, but not necessarily for the benefit of those countries, but to the benefit of the hegemon. And of course, this is where Cuba finds itself. This is where anybody that is desirous of assisting and aligning itself with Cuba is seemingly getting themselves into hot water. And even when they're doing so in an attempt of trying to deal with real issues and challenges that are afoot right here, like our health challenges, like trying to ensure that we have enough nurses and doctors at our hospitals. That is the challenge that the Caribbean is finding itself into. Anything that can be used as a bargaining chip is being used as a bargaining chip, it would appear. And of course, so there is this great effort at, anything that you could use to transact. And of course, hey, if you want to trade in my country, then you need to follow our rules, and you need to obey effectively what we want you to do. And this is what is at play live and direct right now. And of course, the point being made by the professor that yes, some countries can flex, and the point is that was being made by Canada's Prime Minister is that if you can't feed yourself and you can't keep the fuel, your lights on, right? If you don't have your own energy, if you don't have your own food, then it's going to be very difficult for you to keep your boat afloat, and you effectively are going to go with the flow. And this is the challenge again that these countries in the Caribbean find themselves in. So the idea of food security, the idea uh, of energy security, which we've been speaking about for such a long time here in the Caribbean. Here it has come again, once again, front and center. These realities are very, very, very much real. And this is the challenge that Cuba finds itself in, for example. It simply just can't keep the lights on for very much longer. And in very many instances, they are going out. And so, can a similar thing happen to any country right here in the Caribbean? Certainly. I certainly can. And so it therefore means that how we then plan out the next 4 years or the next 10 years is very, very important in terms of what are the priorities as to what really matters at this point in time in terms of where and how we should be investing, what we should be placing as front and center, because it certainly cannot be a sort of business as usual environment for the Caribbean. Well, that's our dish of the day. And we got to take in our weather report at this time. So we'll come to that. Of course, that's through the kind support of the St. Lucia Met Services.
And that's all, of course, to the 1.1. It's not time for your weather report as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style Talent Bath. The forecast in St. Lucia Valley for the next 24 hours. The winds will be blowing from between the east and east-southeast near 17 miles per hour or 28 kilometers per hour. The weather affected partly cloudy skies with a few brief showers. The forecast for the Los Angeles, fair to partly cloudy skies with a few showers. And the weather summary, the Atlantic high pressure system will maintain light to moderate easterly winds across the region during the next couple of days. A relatively dry and stable atmosphere over the Los Angeles will result in generally fair conditions over the islands during the forecast period. And this was the weather forecast as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style Talent Bath.
And welcome back to the lunchroom here at Radio Caribbean International. We've got about 17 minutes to go before the hour of 2 o'clock. And of course, the number to call in, it is 452-3046. Again, 452-3046. And we also have our WhatsApp number available. That is 284-6001. 284-6001. Let's go to the phone lines. Good day, good afternoon, and welcome to the lunchroom.
Mr. George.
How are you doing, caller?
Not too bad.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Now, what I want to ask, where Trinidad is getting the doctor? Who treats the doctor?
Well, in the case of Trinidad, for the most part, I think they have a fairly large number of local doctors that are trained, but they also get from Cuba as well, I believe. They do have some from other parts of the world.
My brother's daughter trained in Trinidad. She's a doctor. She was a doctor. She do something else now.
Mm-hmm.
But she was trained in Trinidad St. Augustine campus.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and we had a teaching hospital heads in Lucia, in Rifo, somewhere there.
Yeah, we have. Well, we have had a few medical schools over the years, yes, and some
Okay,
still
now,
operate, yes.
New technology, with how far we're going now, can we get the export in to train our people here in St. Lucia?
Of course, caller. I mean, it's happening already. We are training medical doctors and nurses here in St. Lucia. We should certainly be able to ramp that up.
We had quite a few Indians from India training right here in St. Lucia.
That is correct. That is correct. And a lot of them are really aimed, though. And in most of these medical schools in the Caribbean, a lot of them are hoping to get to the United States of America. So it's ironic because here we are in the Caribbean and we are training a lot of the schools that we have, these St. George's University and Ross University and Spartan, and we are training doctors and other and nurses for the U.S. healthcare system, right? That's the whole aim of a lot of these individuals who are coming from Nigeria, coming from India.
To America.
They want to get into that. They want to do. Eventually, they get to the U.S. They do their USMLEs and they want to get into practice in the United States of America.
And that's where
that's our problem now. And people have said too, if the United States says, okay, you're getting 10 scholarships from Cuba right now, we'll give you 10 scholarships to the United States of America, right? For medicine. The point has been made. If you're not careful, of the 10 scholarships that you get, that you've received, maybe one person might come back, right? So
that's where what we call the brain
drain
wash coming from, the brain wash, because by the time they are studying in they have a time they open a market and all the people who want doctors come and interview them right there in America before they even jump to St.
Yeah, so I mean, we have a lot of St. Lucian born doctors who've studied in many places around the world, and they're out there, but they're working outside of St. Lucia. Can they be leveraged in some way? Maybe that's another thing. I mean, we've been speaking about the role of the diaspora. Is there a way of trying to structure some kind of program where they can, in fact, provide more support? That's something to consider. That's something to look at.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, Mr. George, when Obama was there, they opened the market there from Cuba to America. And before you say Jack Robinson, thousands of doctors left Cuba. But then they'll give them flat, they'll give them houses, they'll give them swimming pool, they'll give them big motor. Before, that was what they're offering them to wipe off most of the doctor from Cuba to America. Right now, there is 7,000 doctors from Cuba in America. So what and them saying for that? Why they have 700 Cuban doctors in America, and we just have their hands they looking after? What's going on with the world? I would like
Seemingly
to know
very unfair place,
goes, because America turning the world upside down.
Yeah. Well, caller, I think we have to see for ourselves. That's what's that's the long and short of the message at this point in time. You know,
but I would like to see what we call CARICOM, put their head together, united we stand, divided we fall. And I didn't like what Camilla Bissett do when she went on the side of the United States. Okay?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr.
All right,
Judge.
caller. Thanks very much for that contribution. And yeah, I mean, it's clear that the points made that we are in the Caribbean, we are just way too integrated to be thinking about our geopolitical situation in the way that we seem to have done it over the past couple of weeks and months. Just recently, in fact, I think a very well-known company out there, Massey, Trinidadian-based company, they, of course, have interests in many parts of the Caribbean. They just recently posted their annual report. And I think about maybe a third of the business is still, a third of the profit is coming from Trinidad and Tobago operations. But a lot of it is not. The majority of it is actually from outside Trinidad and Tobago. I think about 27% coming out of the operations in Guyana. Certainly, I think another 13% of the profit coming from Barbados, I believe it was, and St. Lucia number 4, with about 11% of the company's profit coming from St. Lucia. So, and a lot of their employees as well, I think over 1,400 employees. So it's clear that we've got a lot of integrated interests here in the Caribbean, economically, socially. And so if that is the case, why is it that at the political level, we have such a fragmented approach to foreign policy, it would appear. So it is, we've heard about it, divide and rule, and we've seen lots of different positions being held sometimes by Caribbean countries, but the idea of having a common foreign policy is something that and foreign policy cooperation, we see it quite often out there in other circles, but then guess what? When it push comes to shove, unfortunately, some leaders go their own way. And so it's definitely something to watch out for at this point. Is it the good time or right time to have a CARICOM Cuba summit? Are we discussing these issues sufficiently? And we've got a situation in Haiti as well, which is very delicate in terms of the security situation there, the governance situation. I think the Transitional Council had called for the removal of the president who was in place. There's efforts at foot right now in terms of working with the OAS. I think there was a recent meeting held by the Eminent Persons Group and the OAS, Organization of American States, on the Haiti situation. And many of these certainly we have to be looking at. And the whole idea of a common space within the Caribbean is another major issue, right? People should be able to move and have that common labor pool for us to be able to work with. Now, as of now, Cuba is not a part of the Caribbean community, and perhaps maybe that's another thing that we need to be considering. Should we be thinking about strengthening the CARICOM community beyond the traditional players? And we have done that in respect of Suriname and in the respect of Haiti. But how deep is that integration? And should we certainly be thinking of deepening that space within and that area for functional cooperation. Because clearly Cuba is very important to us, and clearly we can be very important to Cuba as well, given the the symbiosis that has to exist in our small region. And I think it's certainly going to be a time for us to start thinking about that. If you have a country like Canada, which is very much in North America, thinking about how it can deepen its ties with the EU to the point where some in Canada are calling for Canada to join the European Union. All right, then we here in the Caribbean certainly need to be thinking as to how we can strengthen our own little space. Even in the midst of all that has been going on, in fact, even suggestions being made that perhaps St. Lucia should start offering citizenship to Cubans who are coming and working in the healthcare sector right here. And I would say, why not? Certainly we see many countries, they use immigration as a means to attract individuals who are coming to make a very necessary contribution. And they have these fast track approaches to get them residency and citizenship. And in fact, Canada just recently did that for doctors, right? And they continue to have these programs because they have their own shortages. And so if they can get doctors from outside, they're going to create these fast track means to be able to get them in, right? So likewise, we have to be thinking about our own immigration policy here in the Caribbean, and how we can then approach some of these challenges, right? Cooperation with Africa is clearly going to be ever more important in the months and years to come. Already, we're seeing such cooperation happening within the medical sphere. Ghanaian nurses, we're seeing Nigerian doctors. We may not be seeing them yet here in St. Lucia, but it's something that is bound to happen, right? There are more babies being born in Nigeria, right, on an annual basis than in all of Europe, I believe. One estimate was suggesting, and that's a suggestion. That's where we've got population growth right now. This is where we now have to be thinking about, especially in an environment where we are facing a potential population decline, population stagnation. That is never good for a country's economy, right? It's not a good situation. It's not good for your healthcare system. It's not good for your pension system. It's not good for your economic growth in general. And so you're going to find yourself with labor shortages. You're going to find yourself with major challenges. And so what many countries have been doing, and we have to wake up to that reality as well, is that of welcoming persons who wish to come in and who wish to find a good home here in St. Lucia and in the Caribbean. So it is a very important aspect in how we have to pivot as a region in looking forward at this time. There has been, when you look at, of course, in the case of Guyana, here we have a country effectively the size of the United Kingdom, with only less than 1 million people, with about 800,000 persons living in Guyana. And yes, maybe there could be a reversal of the flow. Guyanese in the diaspora may be coming home, may want to do so. But at the same time, Guyana is and has always been and continues to be considerably underpopulated. And so there is a lot of potential that exists in the Caribbean today. But it certainly calls for a great degree of cooperation, a great degree of leaders working together, planning together, solving the problems that we are facing together. Because I think when you look at it on the face of it, yes, we do have the resources. We do have the resources that it can take to be able to solve a lot of our own problems. But it's certainly going to take a willingness to be able to work and cooperate collectively as a region, and of course, to be able to speak up for each other as a region. So it is certainly very, very interesting, but also exciting time for the Caribbean, and one can say even for the world, because of course, as has been pointed out, it means new opportunities. It means having to think a little differently, or maybe very differently in terms of the approaches that have been taken in the past. As of now, when we look at what's available, however, the technologies are there, but they must be leveraged. The resources are there, but they must also be utilized effectively and efficiently. So we have a big challenge on our hands, certainly as a region, but if we think a little differently, maybe we can actually work through this for the betterment of everyone. That's our program here today at the Lunchroom, and of course for the week. And we do hope that everybody has a very safe and enjoyable weekend. Hopefully, we can remain safe on the roads in particular. Remember not to be driving under the influence of anything, and try to contain any road rage. It's not going to help any situation. You've got to be logical. You've got to be rational on the road. So please do just that. I'm your host, Alex George Jr., saying goodbye.